Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to this module where we're teaching best practices for property management companies based on the success that Eduardo has had over the last few years in his entrepreneurial ventures, as well as with scaling Angel Host from zero to more than 1,000 properties that we currently work with. So, thank you for being here, and thank you, Eduardo, for your time.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Sebastian.
Absolutely. So today we're going to be talking about the module number 3 is property owner acquisition and retention. So you're a property manager and you want to grow your property management business. You need to find homeowners, right? And Eduardo, I'd like to get your thoughts on when you're first starting out, right? And maybe you already have as a property manager, the person listening to this already has one, two, maybe even 10 properties. But at the very beginning, you're kind of having to sell this service for which you don't necessarily have all the expertise just yet to deliver. You don't necessarily have all the infrastructure on the cleaners and on the maintenance and all the teams
Technology.
established. So how do you go about just having that confidence on your vision of saying, you know what, I'm going to go out there and sell this thing that I have a vision for, but it's not necessarily ready yet? How do you sort of go through that as an
Mhm.
entrepreneur when you're trying to get your first few clients, in this case your first few property owners?
Right. And just before getting started with that, Sebastian, I'd like to mention something important. And even though this course is centered around growth and how to scale, I think it's important for every entrepreneur, every property manager out there, to decide if scaling is something they truly want. Because sometimes I've seen that there are some businesses that run extremely well at a certain scale, and the moment they try to go bigger, they realize that they need more infrastructure, that they need to. We were discussing on the last episode about hiring people and trusting others and delegating. Not everybody is comfortable with that, right? So I think it's very important for all of us to decide to what level we want to grow our companies, to what level we are comfortable managing that. So just before getting to that question, right? Because again, you have to be happy with what you're doing. You have to enjoy the work you're doing, and that is valid for any profession, but especially for property management, where you have to deal with people. You have to deal with constant up and downs, right? And unhappy guests sometimes, and other times very happy guests. So you have to be aware that if you're going to grow, there will be challenges along the way, right? And you have to be prepared for that. Now, assuming that perfect, you made the decision. I do want to grow. I'm either very small. I just have a handful of clients, or I have no clients whatsoever. Um, yeah, it's always a challenge. Those first few clients to get them on board. Everybody has a different story. Um, it's interesting. I'm going to just talk about Angel Host specifically. The first two clients of Angel Host were actually my business partner and I, right? We both had vacation rental properties, and we had property managers handling them and doing a tremendous job. But when it came to getting reservations, we were not that pleased with how many reservations they were getting. We were not very pleased with the way they were doing pricing, and we thought, well, it could be done in a better way, and that's where the idea of Angel Host came up, right? To provide good property managers around the world with the tools necessary to provide a better service. But going back to where we got those first clients for, so client number one and client number two, my business partner and I. Client number three was actually my brother, right? That had some vacation rental properties, and I convinced him to join in. Client number four was actually my cousin that also had a property. So at first, it's not unheard of that it's either family or friends or people that you know that will become your first clients. They're people that trust you, and therefore they're willing to give you a try, right? And then with that base, then you can start growing from that. I've heard many stories from property managers that were had a second home and met their neighbors, and their neighbors asked them to start helping them manage the property. Others basically, I heard of one that was literally sitting by the beach and he met someone and that someone told him, wow, you should be a property manager. You understand the market so well, you live here, you should do this. And that's how he got started. So those first steps are always going to be a little bit challenging, but once you have that initial base, right, it's about how do you scale, how do you get those additional clients, and for that there's a multitude of options out there available, right? uh, from asking for referrals. That's a very important one, right? If you have a happy client, most likely your clients know their neighbors, know other friends that could be interested in the service. Or maybe since you're representing a property, you are being asked to attend the HOA meetings, the homeowner association meetings, and by attending those meetings, you get a chance to meet other owners as well, and understand what are the needs and where are your services required, all the way to literally putting a billboard or going on online marketing, using online marketing. And so when people search for property managers in the area where you are, well, buy those keywords and get and have a good website to start promoting. So there's a myriad of options out there, but just be cautious of, first of all, your investment. Try not to go crazy and make sure that it works. And number two, also make sure that if things are working out, to scale at a rate that, once again, you're comfortable with.
That makes sense. And I like that you started this session with, some introspection on why do you even want to grow? Like, is growth
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
what you're going after? And I think that makes a lot of sense. While at the same time, we I think it's important to clarify that there's growth, and then there's just kind of maintaining your current size as a property manager,
Hmm.
right? And growth is only what happens if you grow more than what you're losing, right, in terms of how many owners you are losing.
Hmm.
But it's
Yeah.
natural to lose some owners, right? There's going to be a natural, especially as you grow larger, there's going to be a
Hmm.
natural level of churn.
Hmm.
Therefore, you know a reason why you should grow, even if you don't want to grow tremendously and scale super rapidly, like, even if you just wanted to maintain your size, there's still a level of growth that is needed, isn't there, just
It's
to
true.
sort of
It's true.
maintain a
Absolutely.
certain size?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the average lifespan of a client for property managers around the world is something in the range of about 3.5 or 4 years. And not because the property manager is doing necessarily a poor job. It's mostly because, the property could be sold, or maybe the owner decides to move in, or decides to put the property on long-term rental instead of short-term rental. There's a myriad of reasons why that could happen. So you're absolutely right, Sebastian. There's always a certain level of minimal sales that needs to happen in order to maintain your size, right? So
Hmm.
whether you have 10 or 15 or 100, because of those properties that you might be losing, you always have to be in sales mode,
Hmm.
to replenish that inventory. But I see it with our clients, time and time again. Most of them, because of the relationships they have built in their community, because of the good service they provide to their clients, they, without really a strong need of selling, they receive inquiries and referrals, and that's what allows them to stay at the size or even grow a little bit from where they are at.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And I think we were opening one of the presentations we did recently with precisely this topic, and also mentioning that yes, there's churn, but then there's
Mhm.
also, you know where things are at currently, there's been an increase in inventory. Demand has not necessarily sort of grown at the same rate as sort of, the inventory has grown, which has led to a bit of an ADR compression across the board. And we're generalizing here, but which makes it so that, in a way, it might even be possible that from a revenue perspective, you might also need to add more properties to maintain, similar revenues, especially if you have, again, homeowners that
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
are making
Absolutely.
less, like you're making less per property. So therefore,
Mhm.
yes, you need to make up for the ones you're losing, but you also need to make up for the diminishing, revenues that you're making per property.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's no secret that the world of short-term rentals, this it's not a market created by Airbnb because things were there before. There were short-term rentals before Airbnb, but it has certainly grown tremendously with the help of Airbnb and other platforms. Um, and the returns have been there for many property owners. And in any market where you have good returns, that's going to attract more competition. And that's precisely what's been happening in many markets across the US, Canada, the Caribbean, Mexico, everywhere we operate, we see that a very large increase in the inventory of properties. And therefore, you're right, a drop in the ADR. And that's why the importance of doing proper pricing, right? So just a
Hmm.
quick parenthesis there, because that would definitely help you maintain or even increase your sales, even in light of harsher competition. But you're right. Most property managers are faced with this. And therefore, if you want to continue paying for your costs and your infrastructure, you will likely need, if not double the properties, you might need a 10-15% more properties that you used to need before in order to cover those same costs. So it is true
Hmm.
that it is a growing market, but it's also a market that is becoming more and more competitive, right?
Hmm. And saturated. Yeah, absolutely. Now let's talk about some of those terms or metrics that
Mm-hmm.
you've been keeping a close eye on since the beginning
Mm-hmm.
of this company, because of your experience as a serial entrepreneur, but that maybe you know property managers that sort of just stumbled into this and are doing this sort of without necessarily having that structure just yet. One of those metrics is CAC, customer acquisition cost. Can you briefly
Correct.
explain to us what is the customer acquisition cost, how you think about measuring
Mm-hmm.
it, what should be
Mm-hmm.
included, what people oftentimes miss to include, but you actually think of
Okay.
including? Just tell us a little bit about CAC in general and why it's very important for property managers to understand this metric.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The customer acquisition cost, or CAC, as you mentioned, is one of the most important metrics in any business. It's basically how much is it costing you to attract a client. I mean, what do we include in the CAC? Well, there's a myriad of things, from the most obvious, like the amount of marketing dollars that you're putting behind a campaign. If you're attending a conference, everything from the cost of attending the conference, the sponsorship, the little giveaways that you use, your travel and time, your meals, like pretty much anything, any cost that you have to incur in order to acquire a client. And some of those costs, you have to consider them like salaries. Uh, you have to basically divide the total salary for a year divided by the number of properties that you're adding, right? So all of those things are taken into account. Now, it's important that you understand how much you should be willing to pay for a client, right? Should you be willing to pay $1,000, $5,000, $100,000? I mean, and the answer is it depends. It depends on the type of property that you're going to be attracting. If your efforts, if your market has properties that produce an average of $20,000 a year, and you're in bookings and you're collecting a 20% um, commission, let's say 20-25% commission on that, you're talking about $4,000 or $5,000 in revenue that you will produce, right? That's your revenue. That's not your profit. That's just your revenue. And let's assume that you can somehow also produce an additional $5,000 for that property between management fees, insurance revenue, ancillary services, concierge services, and so on and so forth. In this example that I'm mentioning, your revenue would be $10,000. Now, in the best of cases, if you have an incredibly well-oiled machine and a good company, your profit margin on those $10,000 would be anywhere between $1,500 and $2,000, or 15 to 20%. I'm saying the best of cases. So if you know that from a certain client, your benefit will be in the range of about $1,500 to $2,000 per year, how much should you be willing to pay for that client? Well, think about it. If you pay for that client $2,000, it means that after 1 year, you will have recovered that investment. Now, is that good? Well, it depends. If the client walks away after 1 year, you basically made no money, right? So you have to consider, what is my average lifetime value? How many years will this client stay with me? So in this simple
Mm.
example that we're putting forward, where you get a profit of $2,000, and let's say that you expect the client to stay with you for 4 years. Over the course of 4 years, you will produce $8,000. It would be a mistake, of course, to pay $8,000 for that client. It means you're going to be working for free for the next 4 years. My rule of thumb is, try to have your customer acquisition cost at a point where you can recover your investment within 6 months. So, in the example that I'm mentioning, where you're expecting to make a $2,000 contribution profit from that client, then I would suggest setting a CAC target of about $1,000, right? Again, in competitive markets, you might have to pay more than that. You might have to get to 1,500 or 2,000. It also depends on where your comfort level is. Or maybe you're adding these clients knowing that by having this client you're going to add others. There could be other reasons for you to pay more than whatever you have decided should be your maximum CAC. But generally speaking, my rule of thumb is to say, let's pay 6 times the profit that we can make for that property. Now, what I would also mention, and is what to consider in terms of your costs, right? There are costs related to servicing that property, and there are costs that are simply fixed. Normally, for the CAC calculations, I always suggest considering only the costs related to actually servicing that property, and not every single cost that you have in the company. But generally speaking, that's a rule that I follow. That's a rule that I see many other companies follow, not just in the property management space, right? Also in the technology space, and others. They're looking to recover their investment. And that means basically that after the 6th month, now you're making a real profit, right? The first 6 months, all the work that you did, everything that you did in the company was just to pay back that initial customer acquisition cost. And then you expect to maintain that client for the next 3, 4 years, so that you can actually make a decent profit.
All right, Eduardo. Now, when it comes to this topic here of customer acquisition, it's extremely
Mhm.
important, but it's also important not just to know how much you can spend to get an owner, and to go and spend it so that you can get that owner, but also to retain those homeowners, right? And I think retention needs to be top of mind for anyone out there that's listening to this as they're trying to build their property management company. What do you think are some sort of best practices, or things you've learned along the way, when it comes to things that can be done to, you know
Mhm.
maintain clients sort of satisfied with the service, and of course, hopefully with the intention that they can stay for longer?
Right. Well, above and beyond the obvious of trying your best to provide a good service, I mean, that goes said. But the most important thing, I think, is communication, communication, communication. Right. And I would like to break this down a little bit more. What do I mean by communication? Uh, it's completely to be expected in the world of vacation rentals. Like, when you're not an hotel that has 24/7 maintenance teams in place, and you don't have a concierge team in place 24/7, and problems will happen, right? There will be issues with the property. There will be um, there will it's inevitable. Things will happen. So I think that's where good communication with your clients comes into play, right? At Angel Host, we of course do our very best to not make mistakes, right? And to run a very smooth operation on behalf of our clients. But mistakes are sometimes made. It's inevitable. It can happen. And that's what we have put in place, a team of account managers that can be in constant communication in a very open and a very transparent way with our clients, so that when things go wrong, we're the first ones to recognize that something went wrong, and we also explain what are the steps we're taking to improve things. Similarly, a property manager that has an owner that is upset about something, there's nothing like listening to your client and not trying to immediately answer whatever objections they're presenting you or issues they're presenting you, but actually taking the time to just listen. We recently took a course on conflict resolution, and I think that one of the key takeaways that I took from that is, if you go into a conversation and the other person is upset, the worst thing you can do is start replying right away to whatever arguments she or he is presenting, right? Just give them the time to speak, give them the time to say what is it that concerns them. And then later on you can start saying, well, I hear you, I hear what you're telling me, I understand this is an issue for you, let me tell you why this happened, or let me tell you what we're doing to make sure this doesn't happen again and what we're doing to solve the problem. So I think that goes a very, very long way in maintaining a good relationship, with owners, or just generally speaking in life. um, the other is information, right, which I consider it part of communication, of good communication. If you're keeping your owners in the dark about their expenses, about their reservations, about what's happening, well, chances are down the road you're going to have some issues. So we always insist very much with our clients to communicate often, with and inform their clients, the property owners, on a regular basis. At Angel Host, we have developed our own owners dashboards, right, with all sorts of interesting information, from what is the average rate at which you're renting, what is your occupancy rate, what is your revenues, how do they compare to the previous year, how is the market doing, because maybe your revenues are down, but the market is because the market is down. Uh, you want to know what your reviews say, what are your review scores on different platforms. So providing this type of information to owners, I think is critical. Some would argue, don't give too much information, because then you're going to start creating more questions than anything else. And there's some truth. So without bombarding your owners with information, keeping them informed, keeping them abreast of what's happening with their property is extremely important. So again, communication, right? And three, last but not least, is don't just communicate when there's issues, right? Yes, when there's issues, be there and respond, but also communicate on a regular basis when things are going well. Let your clients know, hey, we had a good month. Hey, the numbers are looking good, right? It's high season and we're very pleased with the numbers. They're better than last year. Whatever it might be, it's very important to communicate. So communicate, communicate, communicate when there's issues, with good information and on an ongoing basis. That's the type of thing
Yeah,
that I I recommend to my team, and I recommend to anybody else to do.
yeah, and on an ongoing basis, I've heard of property managers having monthly newsletters that they send out, sort of to their homeowners,
Mhm.
explaining what has been happening, what updates has the property manager been working on. And I was also
Mhm.
talking with another property manager yesterday that, to your point, they had their homeowner relations team sort of reach out to the owner with good news. It was
Mhm.
sort of like a best practice indeed as well, of like, hey,
And
tell
it's
them we
not
just got
easy.
this amazing
Mhm.
booking. Tell them that, hey, we just found this problem in your property and fixed it. It would have been a problem that the guest would have reported maybe 6 months from now, but we found it already. So yeah, preventive sort of communication on positive matters makes sense.
and I'm and I'm sure some people listening will say, well, that's wishful thinking, because I spend so much time on a day-to-day basis just solving issues that I really don't have time for this. And it's true, the day-to-day operation of a property management company is very consuming. It's very time consuming. But just like anything else in life, you have to set aside, even if it's just a few minutes, right, to deliver those good news. And that goes not just for your owners, that goes even for your team. We recommend as well, if you have good reviews, it's human nature to just focus on the bad ones, right? Hey, we got a 1-star review for this, or 2-star from this bad guest. Whereas, we should also be focusing on all the 5-star reviews that are received, right? So it's worth the effort. It's worth the effort to communicate those good news to both your team and your owners. It does make a difference. It does create a better work environment and a better relationship also with your owners.
Hmm. Now, in terms of, you know, homeowner acquisition and retention, you gave a
Mhm.
presentation not too long ago where you sort of define two types of homeowners that kind of exist out there, and you define them as the one that sees their property as a business versus the one that sees their property as a second home. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is? What are the differences between those two types of homeowners, and why it's important for property managers to be aware of these differences, both from the moment that they're trying to acquire owners, but also when it comes the time to sort of deal with the owners that they already have. Tell us a little bit more about
Absolutely.
that distinction you made there with the different types of homeowners that property managers tend to face.
Absolutely. And I'm actually trying to pull up my screen here because it's sometimes it's better to just show it with show it visually. So just give me a couple of seconds here, and if I can quickly share my screen, I'll see if it's possible. So let's try this. Present. Let me share my screen, and let's see if this works. So I'm sorry about that. I was not actually. Um, okay, no, it doesn't work with this recording system. But I'll just explain. Basically, we have indeed we have two types of property owners in this world. Those that bought the property because they wanted the kids with their family. It's their second home, and they treat it as such, meaning they have a decor they like. They use it often throughout the year. And when they put it for rent, they have it very clear in their minds that for whatever reason their property should never be rented below a certain price, right? Um, or it has to be rented only during certain periods of the year, and that's fine. And that's what we consider a second homeowner, right? Which is very different from a business investor. You know, someone who's in business to who bought the property to make a return. And I would argue those are. It's much easier to work with owners that consider their properties an investment than those that consider their property a second home. Why? Because those that consider it an investment are more likely to follow recommendations on what the minimum price should be, right? Usually, a homeowner will tell you, second homeowner will tell you, no, 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 my property is amazing, and please never rent it for less than $300 a night. The business owner is going to tell you, I don't care at what price you rent it. You can rent it at $200 or $100 a night if you want, as long as my yearly revenue is maximized. The business owner will tell you, hey, give me some recommendations on what do I need to change, remove, or add to my property. Whereas the other person will say, no, no, my couch is beautiful and my curtains are not going anywhere because those are the curtains that I like. And it's completely valid, right? And if you want to have pink bed sheets, that's completely fine if it's your home. However, if it's a business and you want to rent it, well, you need to have white bed sheets, right? That's the standard. So it's important that when you're adding a client to your portfolio, to ask some questions to get a good understanding as to whether this individual is a second homeowner or is someone interested in maximizing their revenue and their investment. Um, and if your business is based on collecting a commission on rentals, well, you're much better off working with someone that considers this a business and will follow your recommendations and will not be questioning you on every single rate, every single reservation. Why did this happen? Why did this not happen? If your business, however, is based on collecting a monthly fee, then absolutely, you know, you can take care of those properties from second homeowners, and you can have a very interesting business there as well.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's a very good point, right? Because the second homeowner, by the nature of setting their minimum rates and not letting you do sort of your work, that will result in them making less money. You charge a commission as a property manager, you're going to be making less money too. So I think it's a very
Absolutely.
important distinction to make, because you might look at a property and you might think, let's say, as a property manager that's looking to add that property into their program, you might say, oh wow, this property has a lot of revenue potential, right? And
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
potential is useless in a way if we're talking about an owner that's not going to let you reach that potential. So I think it's
Absolutely.
important when you're looking at bringing in a property into the program, and when you're looking at your owners that you already have in your program, just having, I would say, that distinction from a CRM perspective, sort of just filtering your owners into this one category or this other category, allows you to
Hmm.
have an active effort to say, okay, can I maybe turn my second homeowners into business homeowners through education, through explaining them
Hmm.
the difference between an ADR and a minimum rate, through sort of spending more time understanding, what is it that really concerns them, to your point earlier on listening, right, to other people. So anyways, I think it's a good distinction you make there. And um and I think it's a good way to wrap up today's episodes. Any final thoughts, Eduardo, or insights that you would like to give people regarding property owner acquisition and retention?
Not really. I guess just to summarize, number one, first of all, decide whether you want to grow or just maintain your business. It's important that you grow to your comfort level and not past that, because you want to enjoy it, and ultimately you can potentially fail if you grow too fast or to a level that you're not comfortable with, right? Number two, when it comes to acquisition, the first clients will usually come from family or friends. After that, it can come from referrals, from you attending meetings, online marketing. Those are all great ways to acquire new owners. Number three, pay a very close attention to your customer acquisition costs, right? My rule of thumb is never pay more than the profits that that client is expected to give you over the next 6 months. So calculate how much are you going to be producing, how much will that be for the next 6 months, and set that as the cap of how much you're willing to pay. And don't forget that your customer acquisition cost includes everything: the salaries, the marketing materials, the event sponsorships, the marketing budget, everything
Even
included
the
into actually
onboarding,
acquiring the
even the
client.
onboarding, I should
And
say, the
onboarding,
onboarding piece.
absolutely.
Some people forget to
Absolutely,
include
because
that.
it's a cost including from having a new client, right? And last but not least, as you're acquiring these new clients, pay close attention to the difference between a second homeowner and a business owner. And ideally, I think for the most part, go for that one that is actually interested in maximizing the returns, because that's the individual that will give you the least trouble and will allow you to really maximize the yearly revenues, as you will likely not be questioned or not questioned as much in terms of the pricing strategy or the marketing strategy, right? As you would with a second homeowner. So I think hopefully these few lessons that we've learned over the years can be of help for everybody else. And I would be curious to know if anybody has any other ideas. Please drop us a line or send us a message at Angel Post. We're always delighted to hear from others, in terms of best practices.
Absolutely. And communicate, 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 right? So you can keep your owners as well.
Sure, sure.
Thank you so
Communicate.
much, Eduardo,
Uh,
for
Absolutely.
your time. Thank you for your time. And
Thank you,
yes, we
Sebastian.
really hope you
Appreciate it.
enjoyed it. And stay tuned for the next module where we're gonna talk about leveraging technology for growth in your property management operation. Until then,
Perfect.
take
Thank
care.
you.